Charter California edition, I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Gerrie DeLong, member of the Long Beach City Council. And sir, as you know, our program airs statewide, and I want to get a sense from you, for our viewers statewide, about the importance of the Port of Long Beach. You know, many of us go there to get on a cruise ship,
Sure,
but we may not realize that this port is mighty critical to the economy.
Both the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles obviously being sister ports,
right.
But it's a huge economic engine, not just for the city, not just for Southern California, but up and down the state.
And there's no question that so much of the product that Southern Californians use, and Americans use come right through the sister ports.
That's correct, particularly in the western United States.
Right.
I mean, this is the gateway to get into the western U.S.
What about the impact for the jobs market in the Southern California region? How critical are these ports?
Well, they're critical for two reasons. Not only are they growing, expanding, and modernizing, but they're good jobs. They're high-paying wage jobs, so it's very important.
And what's interesting about both ports, I believe I'm correct when I say that the city of Long Beach owns the Long Beach port, and the city of Los Angeles owns the Los Angeles port. Is that right?
Actually, the state of California owns the ports, but the cities administer the ports through a trust.
I see, but there's no doubt, if I may say, that the cities really, I mean, they're the ones that are operating them. Is that
absolutely
fair?
true?
So
yes,
they are.
The cities appoint the Board of Harbor Commissioners. The Board of Harbor Commissioners hire the executive director and staff.
I see.
So yes, the cities provide. We approve the budgets here at the Long Beach City Council
Right.
for the Port of Long Beach, but we all do it on behalf of the state of California.
Is that the same in Los Angeles? That the
It is.
city, so the cities are running these ports?
Yes, they are.
You mentioned what we know as the Board of Harbor Commissioners.
Correct.
I assume both cities have those commissioners.
Yes.
And they are plum appointments, am I right?
They are, but they're
I don't mean that pejoratively.
But they're a lot of work to them.
Right.
It's probably the most important commission in the city of Long Beach, but it's also the one that requires the most work.
Are they full-time positions?
They're not full-time, but there's weekly meetings. There's many meetings in between the board meetings. It's a lot of work.
Are they compensated?
They're compensated with a stipend of maybe $100 a meeting, something along
so
those lines.
Those that are participating with the Board of Commissioners, I mean, they really need to be committed to the process.
Yes, they're devoting a significant portion of their time to be a good harbor commissioner.
What does it take to be a harbor commissioner? You know, what are you doing? What background knowledge, if any?
Well, actually, we look for a variety of things. We'd like to have a captain of industry, somebody that understands the private sector, somebody that maybe in their own personal private business interacts with CEOs and is very comfortable doing that, because those are major tenets at the Port of Long Beach. On the other hand, we want people that represent the community, people that understand how maybe pollution that's emanating from the port is impacting a community. We want a representative from that community on the port to be able to speak to those issues.
And port commissioners are appointed by the mayor with city council approval, or?
That's exactly right. They're appointed by the mayor and then ratified by the council.
And so in the city of Long Beach, how many port commissioners are there?
There are 5.
And these individuals come from a variety of backgrounds.
They do.
They're not necessarily maritime experts or maritime lawyers. They each have their own set of expertise.
They do. And that's what makes it work.
Right. And there's no question that when you look at the staff of the Long Beach port, I mean, these are top of the field.
Absolutely.
And the outgoing executive director, where is he now?
He went up to the Port of Oakland.
Okay, but I thought didn't someone go to Washington, D.C.?
There was a harbor commissioner several years ago, Mayoral Cordero, that moved from being a harbor commissioner to being on the Federal Maritime Commission in Washington.
So you can see that this is not the minor leagues. This is the big leagues.
And the Port of Long Beach is obviously highly regarded for him to get that appointment in Washington.
And so when you combine the two ports, the Long Beach port and the Los Angeles port, they have the most cargo in the nation.
The most container volume.
Container volume in the nation, and in the top.
I'm sorry, in the world. I mean, really. I mean, they're in the top.
Okay, so I want to talk about the Board of Port Commissioners, because for better or for worse, at least one of the members of the board has been in the news.
Yes.
And not for the right reasons.
That's unfortunate.
And I do want to say these are all allegations.
Correct.
We have no idea what the final result will come out, but we do know that City Auditor Laura Doud is looking into this. We're going to be speaking with her after we speak with you. What do we know about the situation? And I bring this up not so much to talk about this particular commissioner, but to talk about the general question of good government.
Exactly.
And so
I appreciate you framing it that way. And that's really, how it came to my attention as chair of the city's budget oversight committee is there were some allegations that there was some inappropriate international travel. So we asked the port to come in on a public agenda, talk to us about what was happening, give us an opportunity to ask some questions. They have followed it with some subsequent reporting.
Right.
And then the city auditor has taken a look at that at a very top level and said, you know what, we need to dig into this a little more deeply to make sure that public dollars are being properly spent.
So what's so interesting about it is you look at the first question. A port commissioner traveled internationally.
Which can be part of the responsibility. There's nothing wrong with that.
Intuitively, that seems appropriate.
Correct.
Although, is it though? I mean, is it a port commissioner's job to be trying to lure business in? Or
I don't know so much as lure business, but certainly it's important for a port commissioner who has a 6-year term, and they can serve 2 terms. So you can serve for 12 years.
Okay.
So it's beneficial to the port if these commissioners have personal relationships with some of the tenants at the port and some prospective tenants.
I understand.
But it's senior staff that does all the heavy lifting and all the hard work. So for example, if you as a commissioner going on an international trip, somebody from senior staff should be there along with you because they have the authority to make the decisions.
So what we know about this situation with this particular port commissioner is it appears that this commissioner traveled to Europe with a spouse, but without staff.
Without staff, and some of the expenses are questionable at this stage. So that's why the city auditor really needs to look into it and make a determination.
And I want to dig deeply into it because it really does it's an interesting analysis, and we're just using this as a case study. What we know is this particular commissioner, what we believe is this particular commissioner went to Europe early and stayed late.
Correct.
And intuitively, I thought, well, if they're going early, I don't have a huge problem with that as long as they're paying for the hotel. But then there's a point of jet lag. So what's your sense on that?
Well,
I mean, could one argue that it's appropriate to leave early if you're flying to Europe?
I think that you could make that argument, and candidly, I would also make the argument that it's okay for the port to pay for the hotel. I mean, if you need 24 or 48 hours to adjust to make sure you're in good shape for the business meetings.
Right.
So coming on Saturday for a Monday meeting, I don't know if that's
not
inappropriate.
A huge issue.
But certainly staying past your meetings with your spouse, I mean, it looks a little bit like a vacation on public dollars.
And what we know at this stage is that with regard to this particular port commissioner, he and his wife did stay after, not in the city where the meetings were held, but rather traveled to Paris. And it appears that that travel was covered by the port.
I don't know the exact details of where they were. I just know that they flew home a couple of days after the meetings ended.
And again, the question, the question is, who's covering what expense? I'll say this, publicly. I don't have a problem if you stay later. You got to pay for it.
Of course.
If you're going to be in Europe, why not enjoy a few days, as long as it's not taking away from your duties.
And that's our city policy as well. If you go on a trip to, say, Washington, you want to stay with a family or whatever, a couple extra days, you just need to say when the city business stops, that you're not being reimbursed by the city anymore. Any additional travel is on your own dime.
And the flight cost is not going to change if you stay an extra 2 days.
But any hotel, any food, any cabs, that needs to be your personal expense.
So, again, looking at this just as a case study, what happens if there is a determination that there was inappropriate spending that was reimbursed? And you don't have to talk about this case specifically, but when something like that happens.
I think it depends on the level. Like, for example, let's say if it was merely bad judgment, then I think it's a conversation probably, frankly, between the mayor and the port commissioner to say, hey, I'm concerned about some judgment things here. And if that individual can say, you know what, looking at it, I understand your point, I'll modify my behavior in the future.
Reimburse?
And perhaps reimburse. I think that's where you are. I mean, we've all had issues with employees, but you don't fire somebody. Sit down, let's talk about it and see if we can't repair it and move forward.
But there can be cases, and again, this is not necessarily this one, where it rises to a level of a criminal reference.
It does, or perhaps the person pushes back and says, well, I disagree. I think I am using good judgment. Well, I'm sorry, but
and then you need, I understand.
That's something that would have to
happen. So we know that Laura Doud, the city auditor, will be looking into this, and we're going to be speaking with Laura Doud when we come back. His name is Gerrie DeLong. My name is Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.
How many American jobs are connected to the Long Beach port? 800,000, 1.2, 1.4, or 2.1 million? 1.4 million jobs throughout the United States are related to the Long Beach port-generated trade.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. We are now speaking with Laura Doud. She is the city auditor in Long Beach, an elected position. And I just spoke with Gerrie DeLong, a member of the Long Beach City Council, and we were speaking very broadly about some allegations with regard to a port commissioner and whether travel expenses were appropriate. I understand that your office is conducting a review into that. To the extent you can say anything, what can you say?
Oh, sure, yes. I was at the Budget Oversight Committee at the time the questions were raised, and again, more information was brought to light at the City Council meeting. So in light of these questions surrounding that, our office is performing a review at this time, and we'll be conducting that starting on Monday.
Right, and a review is just a preliminary look at the scenario. We have no idea what the facts will uncover, and it's not a full-blown audit per se.
Right, that's right.
What is a full-blown audit then?
Well, an audit is it is more comprehensive in nature. We have to abide by certain standards set by the generally accepted government auditing standards.
I remember the GAP, is it called? Or,
I guess, and there are the GAP too with different financial statements. Yes, this will be a limited scope review based primarily on those questions arisen at the Budget Oversight Committee.
And it could be that based upon that review, you decide in your discretion that an audit would be appropriate.
Yes.
And, or it may not.
Right.
I mean, it's that simple.
Right.
I do want to say something. I received some press releases from your office, and I do have to commend you and your office for issuing press releases when the audits came out with positive news. You know, you so always presume that the auditor is just in there to dig up dirt.
Right.
But, you know, speaking of the harbor, I mean, in one instance, it looks like the harbor's done pretty darn well.
Yes, they have. And we did look at the city's fuel expenditures throughout the city.
Right.
The city has a quite complicated fueling system. There's 3 different systems they have, one at the harbor, one at the water, one at the city.
Right.
And the one you mentioned at the harbor, they are doing a good job. They have fuel rings, they're programmed, they're tracked, they're monitored, they're accounted for, and they've done a good job. I think as an auditor, it's only fair when you're going to criticize a department that when they're doing it right, that you give them credit for doing a good job.
And there's also the question of oil production tax. We know that Long Beach voters, I believe in 2007, passed a production tax on oil. It's known as Proposition H. You did an audit and you found?
Right, we found that Gas and Oil is appropriately monitoring the oil that is produced and the amount of money that the oil producers are submitting to the city. They have a very good tracking system in place. It gives us a lot of confidence to know the city's collecting the right amount of revenue. So again, we wanted to give them credit for a job well done.
You used the word they have an excellent monitoring system. I mean, that says a lot.
Yes, it does.
This was an audit, not a review.
That's
I mean,
right.
So you went in there, you dug around, and you found that they're doing their job, which is so refreshing.
Yes.
We always presume that government is wasting money, but in this instance,
and like you mentioned, it was an audit. It's very very thorough review, and it is refreshing to know that there are really good areas of the city that are doing a great job too.
But you mentioned fuel expenditures.
Yes.
And unfortunately, when you looked at one of the other, can I call it a department?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, the Fleet Services Bureau within the Department of Financial Management, that their fuel expenditure system was not effective.
It wasn't, no. And you know, when you're looking, when you have a city the size of Long Beach and with the volume of activity that takes place with fueling expenditures, they purchased approximately 1.8 million gallons of fuel, approximately $5 million. They had approximately 112,000 transactions, different fueling transactions within a year, plus estimated amount of about 2,000 employees with access to the fueling.
You know these numbers.
Well, I know these numbers.
You know these numbers,
yes. Because, well, it's complicated too. Like I mentioned earlier, there's 3 different systems: harbor, water, and the city. They all have a different system. Specifically with the city, they have different keys with employee key, vehicle keys.
And the bottom line is, whether you live in Long Beach or not, what you are uncovering is relevant for any municipality throughout the state. I mean, this information is valuable, and I'm sure you share it with your sister and brothers, you know, in auditing departments.
Because you want to have the strongest software controls, internal controls, to ensure the city doesn't leave itself open for fraud. But in this case, because the controls were lax, these keys were able to.
When you say keys, what do you mean keys?
Okay. The employees have been assigned certain keys.
Okay. Literally.
Okay.
A key.
And these keys are can access any fuel pump for any vehicle. These keys should be specific to the employee,
I
to the
see.
vehicle, and only that particular vehicle. So there are employee keys and vehicle keys, vehicles being specific to that one vehicle. However, when we went in there, we found out that an employee key can be used to access any vehicle, whether it's owned by the city or not. So
Oh my!
the tracking
that is
system.
just it's an invitation.
It is.
To fraud, and it may not even be intentional or,
No.
or with malevolent
No,
intent.
that's right. But as a result, because the tracking and reporting was so poor, we don't know if fraud exists or not. When just another quick example with an employee key, we found that these keys were given to employees that have been retired, no longer with the city, but are still being active. So we were asking the question: are these retired and terminated employees still accessing the city's system?
And?
Or, well, no one knew because it's not. It hasn't. They didn't know if this particular key was given to someone else and not input correctly in the system.
And I know that staffing's a question on this very
Yeah.
matter. That because of budget cuts, staff has been cut, and so at some level it could be that we need staff.
Yes, and I mean, again, this was a 4-part series,
Right.
one with the city, next with the harbor, then the water, and overall we're going to look at consolidating, putting it into one system to be
that's
more
the-
cost efficient.
So that's the question, Laura, is that you do these audits, is there an appropriate response on the other side?
Yes, I think so. That first of all, proper management, proper training, proper reporting. We have technology available now that can do the things
It is
that,
so
that the
remarkable
city is doing manually.
You mentioned technology, and I will never forget our discussion about animal services and how they were using paper to track everything.
Yes,
everything.
that's right. I
And
know.
this was last year,
That's-
City
yeah,
Auditor.
right.
Am I right?
You're right.
You
You're exactly right.
completely blew me away on that one.
Yeah,
And
I know.
so, but sadly, this is not a situation unique to Long Beach. I mean, a lot of government's still in the dark ages.
That's right. And even though that in the fuel expenditures
Right.
they do have a system in place, the configuration isn't right. So we're advising them to get
Right.
the parameters.
So do we have the money though for the technology? Because you need a technology update, and that costs
Yes,
money.
yes, that's right. And we're proving to the council that if you update the technology and you invest up front, you will
Right.
recoup
It
in the long run.
amortizes.
Yeah, exactly.
I also must offer a hearty congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Because it appears that Long Beach, I think it's for the 3rd year, is it in a row or 3rd year?
Third year.
Third year,
Yes.
fair enough. You've received what's known as the Knighton Award. And this time it was in connection with parking citations.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Thank you. We're very pleased to report that we did receive the Knighton Award from the Association of Local Government Auditors for our
Okay.
parking citations audit.
It's
where
all,
we-
for every industry there's an award, and whatever it takes. I'm just glad you got it.
Well, thank you. I mean, like I mentioned earlier, we really try to do a thorough job. We really focus on issues facing the city too. When I put out an audit, it's something that I believe in can make change for the
Right.
better improvement to recoup money or to cut down on costs or
And
expenses.
this particular award focused upon parking citations and how the city was or was not collecting.
The $18 million of outstanding parking
$18 million.
Excuse me, yes.
Yeah, 18 million. And the city's budget a year is about,
The general fund is about,
is it 200?
oh no, it's closer to 400 million.
That's
Yes.
still, I mean, that's
Yeah.
a huge
portion of it,
percentage
yes.
that just poof.
Right.
I believe that the city collects about 13 million a year
Yes.
in parking. So this was over a year's worth of money that just,
Right, right. And it was less than 3 years old. So it was collectable. And again, it was
collectible. So
it was
that's great
collectible.
news.
It's only 3 years old or less, that $18 million. It's not
Could you
way
even imagine?
outstanding. So again, it was the system that was
Right.
outdated. It wasn't interfacing with the DMV and others. So because of that, the city has is in the process of investing in a new system that will interface with the DMV. So we'll have updated information. When people do sell their cars, we can track the specific owner
Right.
that owes the tickets.
I want to say this. I hope for those that are cynical about government that they understand that there are people like you that really are working to make government efficient, and that when you do uncover something, there is a reaction.
Yes.
There is a reaction, and
Yeah.
that's the good news, and that's why I congratulate you on this award and for what you're doing for the city of Long Beach and the entire region.
Well, thank you.
Of course.
We work for the public. We're elected by the
It's
public.
very
We
simple.
report to the public. It's their tax dollars. We want to make sure.
She's Laura Doud. I'm Brad Pomerance. This is Charter California Edition.
U.S. consumers spend how much annually at retail establishments buying household goods and other consumer products imported through the Long Beach port? $8 billion, $13, $21, or $25 billion. American consumers spend $25 billion a year at retail stores purchasing household goods and other consumer products imported through the Long Beach port.
Welcome back to Charter California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance. Our guest, Gerrie Schipske, member of the Long Beach City Council, also a candidate for mayor. That election will be held in April 2014. And I want to speak with you about the city's relationship with its port. We know that we have port commissioners in the city of Long Beach, and I recently spoke with, on this program, Gerrie DeLong, one of your colleagues, Laura Doud, who's the city auditor, and there's some question about the propriety of international travel. What's your sense of international travel and the appropriateness of elected officials generally traveling abroad for a variety of reasons?
Well, we have a great port. We're the #2 cargo container port in the world,
Right.
and it is an economic engine.
Huge.
So it is extremely important that those commissioners, who, by the way, are nominated by the mayor and
Right.
approved by the council, be able to travel internationally to encourage business to come to Long Beach. I mean, that is part of their mission, and that is to make sure that we get contacts in all places across the world.
Right.
That being said, there's a latest brouhaha that suddenly there's a real interest in their travel budget, or expenditures
Right.
actually, which is kind of unique in the sense that the port has always traveled. There's never been a case or a concern about where they went
Right.
and who went. I'm very concerned that what's happened with the port is that we've got elected officials politicizing the port. And it's not just my concern. Members of the shipping industry have come and talked with me and
Really?
others and said, we're becoming the laughing stock of the shipping industry because never have they seen a port so politicized where elected officials are going after port commissioners, interfering with different things. And that's just bad. They should be able to travel. Now, if there's any sense of wrongdoing,
Yes, please.
absolutely we need to uncover it. But what is hypocritical in this equation is that the mayor and 2 council members have gone at the port on the port's dime.
Okay.
And that's never been discussed, and that's never been a subject of any kind of discussion. So I just put a
Recently.
memo to the auditor asking her to include all non-port commissioner travel on the port dime so that everybody can see who's going,
Right.
where they went, and what was the purpose of elected officials going when in fact they just were probably just traveling and not necessarily empowered with any authority to
Right.
encourage trade in this country.
But would it be appropriate for city council members, the mayor, I mean, you hear about, Mayor Villaraigosa of Los Angeles, former, I think he went to China, and Governor Brown went to China, and so you do see elected officials trying to lure business.
I don't think maybe perhaps the travel is inappropriate. I think we need some parameters. But I do think this latest focus may be a bit of a witch hunt to go after commissioners who didn't do what they were directed to do politically. And that's wrong. That's wrong on any level. So let's take a look at everybody's travel. Let's get a public discussion about it. Let's get some parameters on it. Make sure the rules are the same for everyone.
Here's a broader question, because what we're hearing out of those folks that are looking into this particular port commissioner is that there's a question about arriving early and staying later, and who should pay when you arrive early and stay later. What's your sense about that question of turning business into a vacation? I don't say that pejoratively. I mean,
again, if any of the expenses incurred for the time that was on their personal time are paid with public dollars, that shouldn't happen.
Right.
But normally, if the travel to and from are always covered
Of
because
course.
you have to get there and come home.
Of course.
If you've gotten there a couple of days earlier or you stay, those hotel room expenses should be yours. But I think that we need to clearly state that that's the case for every bit of public travel on Long Beach, and not suddenly make a cause out of one person. If in fact there are some concerns, then have this as a teachable moment for all elected officials about this is not correct, this is what we should do. But we don't know that he did anything incorrect
if
at this
it
point.
did occur, or just if it ever occurs.
Yeah.
What would be an appropriate response? Would it be reimbursement? Would it be removal?
No, I think it would be reimbursement, because certainly if that hasn't been the policy and it wasn't clearly communicated, I think in fairness to anyone that was involved in that, including if it be a council person or the mayor
Whomever.
or anyone, that in fact that they be given the opportunity to reimburse the public dollar and then make it very clear that this is what our policy is going to be from now.
Clear.
Right.
I want to ask you about healthcare reform.
Sure.
In addition to being a council member, you are a nurse
I am.
and a professor
Right.
of is it nursing or is it healthcare general?
Healthcare administration.
Healthcare administration. And so you know that we are in the midst
Right.
of a revolution in healthcare
Yeah.
insurance.
Absolutely.
And we know that from October 1st to March 31st, that's a very significant window for many individuals in the state of California. They will be able to do one of two things. They can sign up for a healthcare exchange, which is
California covered.
exactly. And there's also the question of the Medicaid expansion. I'm not sure if there's a sunset on when you can apply for the Medicaid expansion, but wow, cover California. So what are you teaching your students?
I'm teaching them that they better learn the ins and outs of the Affordable Care Act because it is very similar to Medicare from the 60s. This is the most dramatic impact we will see in our lifetime, perhaps, on health care.
No doubt.
It's changing the access. It's taking 33 million uninsured. It is giving them access, which in the sense of healthcare administration is going to drive the number of jobs in healthcare because you're going to have to provide access for all these people.
Right.
So in the classes that I'm teaching, you need to learn the ins and outs of the law, but you also need to understand what the impact is going to be on healthcare so that as you get into that profession, you know, you know ahead of time what you need to do.
And there's no question that we will need more medical professionals.
absolutely.
At
every level.
At nurses, nurse
Right.
practitioners, physician's assistants, doctors themselves. But the question is now, as a member of the city council, you are out and about, you're running for mayor, you're out and about. And so I have to think that people are saying to you, Councilwoman Schipske, I'm confused. I don't know what to do. I don't understand. What are you hearing on the street? Or are you hearing anything?
I'm not hearing anything in the sense of the Affordable Care Act per se. What I'm hearing are from individuals who now have part-time jobs, both in the city and elsewhere, and the lack of clarity about what employers are doing or not doing so that they don't have to follow the employer mandate.
What we know, if I may interrupt, I mean, what we know is that the employer mandate, while it has been delayed, that's another question, that what employers are doing is shifting people to have, what is it, like 38 hours a week?
No,
or
under 30.
So it's 29 hours a week.
The trigger is 30. They're pulling them under 29, which diminishes their ability to make money, plus then pushes them out into the exchange or to take a penalty if they fail to sign up for health
What do you
insurance.
think about that? I mean, on the one hand, I think scoundrels. On the other hand, I understand. I understand. It's an expense.
It was an unintended consequence of this law. The more I look at it, the more I really wonder how much work was done with employer groups or how much thought was put into. Do you know what this is going to do if you?
Chamber of Commerce, I thought, was
if you
involved.
move,
You're right.
Well, they didn't want it at all.
Right.
They didn't want it at all. But I don't think there was much discussion. All right, major employers then were going to look at this and say, okay, all the people that were working 38 hours, which is still part-time, we're going to cut you down to 29. I don't know that there was a lot of discussion. The other issue that's coming up that is affecting some major groups is that the bottom line, you have to provide a minimum of 9.25% of the person's salary in a health care benefit. In other words, the premium that you charge cannot exceed 9.25%.
I understand.
Well, you look at employers that go, wait, we've been fully funding health care. We could pull it back down and say, this is where it's going, so we're taking Cadillac coverage and we're going to reduce it down to some basic coverage. I don't know how much thought was put into that about the consequence of just handing now a key to somebody that says, okay, no more, we don't have to do it at the level.
What's so frustrating for some is that because this issue is so polarized, every law needs fixes. I mean, that's not a big deal, but there can be no fixes because whatever you think about the law, the Republican majority in the House, if you reopen it, they want to reopen everything
and the
or repeal.
longshoremen recently just pulled away from the AFL-CIO, and one of the reasons they used, although I think there was others, was because the Affordable Care Act now was impacting their members because this is what was happening is that the employers of longshoremen were saying, because a lot of them do work casually, and they were getting full-time health care. Gee, we don't have to provide this big lush benefit package. We could send you out to the California covered and we can cut your hours down to 29 a week. And they are saying this is harming their membership. So I think we're in for a bumpy ride, but the same if you look back at when Medicare came into being, everybody was yelling.
Her name is Gerrie Schipske, candidate for mayor of Long Beach. I'm Brad Pomerance. Thank you so much for watching Charter California Edition.